So it looks like it is about 2 o'clock right now. Sometimes it takes people a couple of seconds to get onto Zoom and understand how it works. So should we give people maybe a minute or two?
I'm fine with that.
Yeah, it's okay.
I was just typing one last email before this got started, and I typed "Welcome everyone." That's what was on my mind. But all I wanted to say is, "Sounds good. See you then."
Means your head's in the right place.
Right, exactly. My head is with you. It's so much for multitasking.
Yeah, it's not all it's cracked up to be.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to say that maybe we should just get started since there are folks who are here on time. And I'm sure we'll have people coming in and out just because that's how these things tend to work. So welcome to everyone, and thank you for being on this webinar with us. So I'm Natalie Furlett from Illinois Campus Compact, and Illinois, along with Wisconsin Campus Compact, have been hosting some webinars over the summer to just engage in some conversations and help folks connect with some experts in the fields of things that they're interested in. So we're excited about today about working with development to advance community engagement. And I'm going to hand it over to Gavin to talk a little bit more about our speakers.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. My name is Gavin Luter. I'm director of Wisconsin Campus Compact. I just wanted to say, again, thanks for everyone for hanging in there with our webinar series this summer. And this is the final one. Essentially, one of the things that we talk a lot about, or that we think a lot about, is how to raise money to advance the community engagement agenda. And I know that I've had some personal experiences with fundraising in my own time for community engagement around the state. And I've made a couple of mistakes in my own job. So I started to talk to some more development professionals, and they said, well, you know, it's kind of good practice if you do this. And then they talked about some software packages that they use. And I said, you know, like, I just don't know a lot about the fundraising development world. And as I was talking with some of my members, they realized that they didn't really know too much either. So we thought, what better way than to actually talk with people who do fundraising and development for their full-time job, and also who have some particular experience with community engagement. So we reached out to Lynette Green at St. Norbert College and Jennifer McFarland at University of Wisconsin-Madison. And there's one big reason why we reached out to them is because they have two of only about 20 endowed centers, kind of named centers to do community engagement work across the country. So something interesting is going on there. They've maybe been able to frame it. And if you all know anything about St. Norbert and UW-Madison, you probably couldn't find two different institutions. Very different institution types, missions, religiously affiliated, you know, secular research, one, liberal arts, pretty different. So wanted to ask them to tell us a little bit more about their world, and they've organized this presentation. They're going to talk through it, and I think they really intend for this to be, you know, obviously kind of not the end-all be-all, but just kind of a conversation starter. And if you all have particular questions or anything like that, there is a chat box that you all will notice that's at the bottom of your screen. So if you have some questions during their talk, you will be able to type it in, and they can actually see it. It'll kind of blink on their screen. And so if it kind of fits, they'll stop and interact with that question. And if not, then we'll just save it to the end. Anything else that I've missed, Natalie or Jennifer, Lynette?
I would just remind folks, most of you should be muted right now, so your microphones are muted. But if you do want to ask a question, or if there's a conversation piece that you want, you can unmute yourself. There's a little blue button that pops up that says unmute. And so, we do that just for everyone else so that we can make sure we can hear the speakers and not just hear background noise. So just pay attention in case you get unmuted for some reason.
Yeah, and just as a silly thing that I like to do on these webinars, give a shout out to Laura, who's actually using her camera. Thank you so much. And the folks at University of Illinois, the room, thanks for using your camera, because it makes it a little bit more personal and kind of see you. And I know it's not a requirement or anything like that, but if you do feel so bold and brave, please do turn on your camera. Not everybody's looking at you the whole time anyway. It's not all about you, right? All right, so we are going to move ahead, and I'm going to toss it over to Lynette and Jennifer to start the presentation.
Sounds great. Let's see, should we go ahead and move the slide forward for a moment to give an overview of what we'll be talking about, or we could actually introduce ourselves. That is, just give a little bit of background about what we do. So again, my name is Jennifer McFarland, and I'm with the University of Wisconsin Foundation. And my experience with community engagement organizations has been working in tandem for several years with the Morgridge Center for Public Service. So I've had the chance to work both with the center and with the donors who have named that center and have been really involved in their programs for a number of years. So I've actually learned a lot about how centers work and what their goals are, and how to better align that with development operations. So that's, after some conversations with Gavin, that's why I'm here today.
And I'm Lynette Green. I'm the Associate Vice President for College Advancement at St. Norbert College. And my interaction from a community engagement standpoint, I've been on both sides of the fence. Before I came to St. Norbert College, I was the Executive Director at Habitat for Humanity here in Green Bay, Wisconsin. And through that, I was able to form a lot of partnerships with St. Norbert College specific to Habitat. So I was on the other side of the fence for a while. And then when I moved here, one of the things that happened is we have a great deal of activity working within the community on these types of projects. And I was in a really fortunate position to be able to be at the front side of starting to find funding to support these programs. And then during that period of time was when our center became endowed. So, to be able to see that grow as well. So a couple different angles that I can bring to the conversation, which I hope you all find helpful. Jennifer, do you want to walk through kind of what we hope to accomplish today?
Sure. Well, you'll see on the screen we have 6 areas, or really 5 areas that we wanted to generally address some of the things that we think have come up the most often in our conversations with our campus partners. And so we thought we'd spend a little bit of time in a few of the key areas, but we definitely want to make sure that we provide time at the end for question and answers. However, we're totally open for anybody to ask a question as we go along, so we can address it in the moment. But we thought also maybe a great way to start was talking about some of the basic language of development, because like any of our worlds, we have jargon, and a lot of it. And so in order to know what we're all talking about, sometimes it's helpful to take a step back and explain, when a development officer uses a certain word, what we mean by that, which might be a little different than other folks. So that's
Natalie, can you push the slide forward now?
So Lynette, you go ahead.
Okay, we're going to kind of tag team on this.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I found when I first started working with our folks here on campus is, as Jennifer said, I went in and I'd start using these words that we in development use all the time, and I would get this kind of look like, what the heck are you talking about? One of them is the term prospect, which for us in development just means someone that might be inclined to give money for this particular project or a different project. So when you hear that word, think about who in your world might be inclined to support what you're doing and who would have resources to be able to do that.
And sometimes prospects can be, people, they can be institutions, they can be other foundations. So a prospect can be not just a person, but an entity. But actually, I realized I'm going to back up to the term development. A lot of people will say, well, I actually did have an interview once where somebody came in and they thought they were interviewing for a computer development position. And I realized, the jargon was too dense. But, development, it does involve fundraising and raising dollars for your cause. But also, the reason we use the word development more often is because you're developing relationships in order to raise that money. So that's sort of how I think about the phrase development in our work. When it comes to grants, I actually had spent some time in some smaller arts nonprofits, and so we got a lot of grants that we wrote and received that type of funding. However, when I moved to the foundation, I found that there was a big disparity between what a gift meant and a grant. And so a grant came with certain reporting requirements, whereas a lot of the work that I was doing, raising gift funds for the Mortgage Center and other areas, was that those were actually gifts where, of course, you'd want to report back to the donor, but there was less of a strict requirement of reporting on it. So, Lynette, has that been your experience?
Yeah, and I'm glad that you brought that up, because the term grant is thrown around a lot. It's used quite loosely, when in fact a lot of institutions are willing to give out money and they call them grants, but they're really gifts. And my sense is that where the tipping point happens is if there's a formal application and a structure and a process that you need to go through, that right away people think it's a grant. And from my perspective, the bottom line is it's money. And if it's money that we're able to secure to help you out, that's what it's all about. But when you hear the term grant, sometimes it can get a little unnerving because you think it's going to be a big, hairy, ugly monster, and that doesn't mean that that's what it has to be.
That makes sense. I think the next term is probably one of the most, it's one that I personally struggle with the stewardship. If I were just to break it down, I would say stewardship is the art of saying thank you in a way that's meaningful to whoever provided the funds. So stewardship to me is a fancy way of saying that, but you will likely, if you haven't heard the word stewardship, we'll probably start hearing more of it because we use it all the time.
That's a great way to define it, Jennifer. I may adopt that for future use over here, because the key piece of it there is it's the same thank you, but it's in a way that's meaningful to whoever gave you the money. Another word that comes up often is endowment, and that's another one that, in my experience, is similar to grant, where it kind of makes people's skin crawl because it's a word that can have connotations that make it sound a bit unnerving. But an endowment, quite simply, is a pool of money that you have been given that is held to support the program in perpetuity. So each institution will manage their endowment in different ways. They will have spending policies which dictate how much of that endowment can be used every year. But the idea behind an endowment is you get this pool of money and there's a certain percentage of it that can be used to support the organization or the program, and that it will be there really for forever.
And a lot of times, endowments are a strange construct unless you work with them all the time. And so, I've learned through the years that a lot of our donors who actually are thinking about establishing these permanent endowment funds don't know, when we first start talking about it, don't have a lot of background in it. So I try and make it very concrete. For example, if a program is being endowed for $1 million, it sounds like, oh my gosh, this place has $1 million to spend, but that's not the case. Just to make it very simple, if there's a 5% endowment rate that can be used for the program, that means 5% of the value of the endowment could be used each year. So in this case, from $1 million endowment, $50,000 could go to the program each year. So it's designed to last for forever. But that sometimes people have a disconnect or a misunderstanding. If a center is endowed with what sounds like a very large number, It's actually designed to provide ongoing support, but a much lower number throughout the years, forever and ever. So that's how I sometimes will share with our donors how an endowment works.
Yeah. Moving on to CRM, that really is the tool that an organization or department will use to manage their prospects, manage their grants. It's the software. It's the software that is used to keep track of things and to keep all of your contact information in there. A shop will, whenever they have contact with a donor of whatever kind, is going to record that information in there so that long after, for instance, I'm gone, whoever follows me can have the history of what happened with that particular donor or prospect.
Yeah, so sometimes CRMs can be very intense and involved, and having a relationship with whoever is connected with the CRM can actually be very helpful to your program, because they could help harness the power of the system in order to help you do your development work. But again, sometimes the outputs are as good as the inputs. So when working with your partners, just being in alignment about what information they might need, or in order for you to get information back out of the software. Oh, and then the last term we thought might be helpful to touch on is prospect base. We talk about that. It's basically a group of individuals or entities that you might be able to talk to, or you'd be most likely to talk to raise money from. And a prospect base can be, as small as 10 to 25 names. It could be as big as 800,000, everything in between. So it just kind of depends on who you are and what you're trying to accomplish, but the prospect base is really where we start all of our development work.
And I would add that the folks that are working with the program, that are doing the community engagement program, are going to be in a really good place to know who those people might be.
Good point.
Do you want to move the slide, Natalie?
Yeah.
So when we talk about development for community engagement, we have to look at it through a different lens than what we typically do for development. Very often when development officers are out raising money, we're talking about what the institution is doing, we're talking about how it's going to impact the students, we're talking about what that dollar is going to do for programs here on campus, and it's very inwardly focused. What we find often, I'm not going to say always, but very often when we're raising money for community engagement, these donors have a different lens that they wear. And they're going to be more inclined to give you money for the primary purpose that you are doing some good things in the community. So if we do something, by way of example, a program where the college students are out in the community at low-income schools and they're doing tutoring and mentoring, we all know that our students are benefiting from that. We all know that our institution is getting a good benefit from that. But these donors are not so focused on that. That's an ancillary benefit in their eyes. Rather, what they're seeing is what the impact is on the local community and those kids that you're helping at those schools. So it's a whole different flair that needs to be considered when you're going out and looking for money for the community engagement. As Jennifer mentioned earlier, the other thing to keep in mind is that very often it's individuals that are going to be wanting to be involved in this, but don't limit yourself to that. Sometimes it's corporations, sometimes it's foundations. It really is a matter of finding out who or what companies or organizations are interested in what you are doing in your community.
And in addition to the community impact, there are opportunities, I think, in what we've found with the Mortgage Center. It seems like a lot of our donors are really, they remember the student experience. And so several of our fundraising programs are focused on making sure that as many students as possible can be involved with the center's volunteer programs. So then that gives them that leg up to go out into the community and then to have just this outsized impact. So we have found that focusing on the student experience has also been a really helpful message to share with our donors, in addition to the community.
Something else that I would add to that is, if we think about this from the perspective of your development officer or your development department, and why should they want to be part of this? Why should they care what's going on from a community engagement standpoint? Very often the donors who are providing money for scholarships and other programs at the college or university really appreciate knowing and seeing what the institution is doing in the community. So when you can go back to a donor and say to them, you know what, this is what our students are doing out in the community, that can become the catalyst for them to say, I want to provide a scholarship, I want to create an endowed chair, I want to do this, I want to do that. That won't necessarily be direct money back for the community engagement, but it helps development as a whole. And that's important to know, because it's a broad relationship that you want to have with your development officers. And if you can help them understand why they should be interested in what you're doing, it's going to help you.
Yes. I'm going to move to the next point with the idea of a fundraising campaign versus individual donations. And why there's a versus in there, in my mind, is that we're in the middle of a big university-wide campaign here, and we have different priorities that are driven by the chancellor, with input from the deans, they get input from the centers and the departments, and we start out with a priority list. But that said, at the end of the day, and what I found pretty much all the time in my work is, I can share the different priorities that we have on campus of different programs, but ultimately individuals that we talk with, or entities that are looking to make a gift to the institution for particular areas, they'll make the decision of where they want to give to. So, it's kind of this delicate dance of, we have to have priorities because we need to know where to spend these very valuable gift dollars. But individuals do have quite a big say. And so where we're going to drive with this is that, creating strong relationships with individuals for fundraising purposes can really help you be successful in any campaign, or even if you're not in a campaign, any fundraising drive.
Thank you.
And then I'll dive down into the corporate relations and individual relationships. One of the main things, and what I've found in my work with both types of fundraising, is that corporate relations is quite a different experience, because corporations have a lot of times very distinct rules about what they give money to. And so it always is worth some time invested if there's a company that you might be interested in approaching for a gift, that you know exactly what they give to, because you don't want to waste their time and you don't want to waste too much of yours. Whereas an individual who, is in their home with a checkbook or a credit card, they have the total wherewithal in most cases about what they want to give to. So those are two really different distinctions that I always want to make sure that people are aware of when thinking about where to spend their time when raising money.
That's a good point. Thank you.
And I just want to interject and say, I remember when on our intro phone call, it seems like most of the stuff at UW-Madison has come from individuals to support community engagement. Yes. Whereas at St. Norbert College, it's been more like corporate. Like a lot of this stuff is kind of run through a corporate entity, which I thought that was interesting, because I think Jennifer was like, oh yeah, it's all individual. And actually, it's actually corporate. It's run through corporate at St. Norbert. And again, I would have kind of thought those things were switched based on the kind of institution you are, but it's just kind of interesting to interject.
So let me just speak to that for a moment, because it will help tie together some of the slides that are coming up. Almost all of the money that St. Norbert raises to support the programs is corporate. The endowment to do the center was corporate, but it was because of some personal relationships. When we were just starting out looking for money for these different programs, I was in the role of corporate and foundation relations. And I was brand new to the college, and it was a new role. And so we were doing a lot of building from the ground up, so to speak. And because of the relationship that our community engagement director had taken the time to develop with me, that's really what drove a lot of it. It was because I happened to be in a corporate role, and it had been impressed upon me what was going on from a community engagement standpoint. So it naturally became something that I could speak to when I was out meeting with companies. And it really goes back to those relationships, both on campus and off campus, that are going to drive a lot of the success. So that's really how a lot of that started here. And because we've done such a good job with the stewardship, as Jennifer described it earlier, we've been able to hang on to a lot of that. So many of the companies right now are really making community engagement a priority for them with their dollars. And so between the relationships and the good stewardship and being able to show impact and getting them on campus, we've been able to maintain a lot of that.
That's a great point. Even though a corporation may have rules, there are still people in that company who can explain the rules or who can advocate back to their leadership team to say, hey, I just talked to this area and it sounds like a really great fit for some, should we look at this? So it does boil down always to the individual relationships in a lot of cases. Lynette, you want to take the next bullet point?
Yeah, I feel like we've been bouncing around a bit here. Development professionals as consultants. So when I think about what the role that I've played with our community engagement folks here on campus, very often it's one of hearing what they have to say, but it's as much asking questions back, the probing questions, the have you thought about this, the can you give me in a really concise, a couple sentences, what it is you're trying to accomplish or the impact, and how does this fit in with what the community needs, and how might we tie that back into our strategic plan here on campus. So it's one of being able to have it's a very unique relationship that we have with our community engagement personnel on campus.
And I will strongly second that. I think once, if you don't already have a relationship with the person in the fundraising area that would work with your area, that's one of my favorite parts of the job actually, is to meet a new area, to learn about it, learn about what they're doing. Because when I'm out traveling, I travel nationwide, and you'll never know when you're having coffee with somebody and they'll bring up something and then I'll remember, oh, wait, I met with this person and they mentioned this. So, I will also ask questions. I'll ask, how much do you need to make this happen? And a lot of times people can't answer that. And I have to know that before I can put an idea or a gift ask in front of a donor. So something that I do in that consultative role is to help think through, all right, this is your program. What do you really need money for? And then I can help advise if it's, sometimes people are looking for money where I can just say, a donor really isn't interested in, and providing money for this type of equipment, but they're really interested in the people component, or vice versa. So that's one of the roles that we do, is to help refine priorities and messaging of areas, and so that we can better share that with our donors or potential donors.
Right.
And just a time check, we're at almost 2:30.
Okay, so we're gonna speed this up a little bit here. Lynette and I can talk about development all day long, but we want to be full of your time. All right, let's get to that next slide. All right. It's important, CRM is important, because customer relationship management is important, because that's where all of the data is kept, where phone numbers and addresses and emails. So one of the things we worked very hard here was to link the Mortgage Center into our CRM. It was a little harder because they didn't have the standard, this person graduated this year, and so they are a graduate of the School of Business, and then we know exactly where they are. We had to find different ways to flag them so that they could then get communications from the center. But once you're linked up, it really helps with communicating with your donor base.
The other thing I'll add is, as you are working with community partners, as your programs evolve and develop, you may have opportunities to be in contact with your donors. It's really important to feed that back to your development officer if you don't have access to the CRM, because they'll want to drop all that information in there so that it provides a complete picture of what's going on with the prospect or the donor.
Yeah, and that helps me if there's another area that's interested in the same donor. If it's in the CRM, we can say, no, this donor, had this conversation with, in this case, the Mortgage Center, and they, they're interested in this project. So it helps kind of plant a little flag to say, I'm working with this person, and it helps us to be thoughtful about strategy. Go to the next slide.
Oh, impact. Impact is so important. All funders, whether it's for community engagement or otherwise, they want to know that the gift that they've made has had an impact. Stories are terrific. It provides a human element, but it's really important to collect data, particularly if you're reporting back to a foundation or a corporation where they have a different set of expectations about what that stewardship is going to look like. I encourage you, as you are forming your programs and in the early stages of going out and starting to seek money, think about what it is that you want to capture that is going to show impact, and make sure that you have the pieces in place to capture that throughout the program. If you don't do that, what happens is you end up at the end of the day and it's time to do a report back, and your development officer is going to say, well, what happened as a result of this money? And you'll get all these stories about the students, but you won't have either data or stories from what happened in the community. In an ideal world, and every once in a while we all actually get to live in the ideal world, your community partner can do this for you. So that would be a conversation to have with them, right up front. As an example, we were doing a program, and we're still doing a program in partnership with the public school system here. And they were able to pull and gather the data that showed the real impact. And when I talk about impact, it's not just X number of meals handed out or X number of low-income students that we tutored. Those are good numbers to have, but it was really impact in terms of what was happening to the people that were being served through all of this. Mm-hmm. So very, very important to be able to gather that information.
And there's some great examples out there too about annual reports. I know there's a balance between spending a lot of time on a report and actually getting all of your other work done. But I've found that, with organizations I've worked with before, and with also, I use the Mortgage Center's annual report to report back to some of our major donors. And it's just that annual report, if you do it year in, year out, even if it's very simple, you can show the growth in programming and impact over time. So, whatever process you put in place, just having one and having it be on a regular basis so that you can track over the long term will come in handy, especially with a key story that really exemplifies the work that you've done. Goes a long way.
That's a good point, that it doesn't have to be, hardcover glossy. We have a one-pager that is really easy to send out, and the beauty of that is it's really easy to pick up and read, so I know it's getting read.
Yeah. Lots of great examples out there.
Yep.
We'll go to the next slide.
Endowments, endowed centers.
Yes. Well, the benefits are definitely a steady stream of income that the center can count on year in, year out for core programming. Depending on how your program is set up, that endowment stream could be for staffing, it could be for supplies or for outreach. You know, everybody has different funding streams, but having an endowment does provide a really nice central amount of resources that can be relied upon. And I think, you know, if you could get to that point, if you're not already, an endowment of any size is a really great place to start.
When I think about drawbacks, it's always hard to find a drawback when you have a steady stream of income. But one of the things that we do occasionally encounter is this whole notion of, well, you're already endowed, you already have a name, and so really you don't need any more money. And that's when it becomes important to be able to educate people on what, in fact, that endowment is doing. I'm not going to repeat what Jennifer said earlier about how the math all works, but once you have that endowment and you have that foundation laid, it becomes important to be able to speak to what it can do and what it can't do, and then that can tee up a situation where you can start talking about what the future might look like if we had more, what else could we be doing?
Yes. And to answer the question, how is this different than grants? Endowment income comes in regardless of if you apply for it or not. Grant funding is something that's sought after. I know early on at the foundation, I had areas of campus that would call me to say, can I write a grant to get funds from the UW Foundation for my center? And so I had to explain that, we're not a grant-making entity. The dollars that we provide to campus are from what the donors have told us they want those funds to be used for. So that's a difference that I've encountered here that I wanted to make everybody aware of if they weren't already.
Yeah. I think we're ready to move to the next slide. So the question of priorities and how do you become a priority? In most institutions, unless you're a priority, unless you're somehow aligned within what's happening in your strategic plan, it's going to be really hard to get the attention that you want to go out and have these monies be secured. What I would encourage you to do is review the strategic plan and see how you can fit within there. And then it's being able to have the conversation with your development officers about how you do fit in there. As you're in the early stages of fundraising, you might be in a spot where you don't yet have the buy-in of a development officer, you don't have that relationship established, but what you may have is a list of individuals or organizations that you think are worth approaching, that for whatever reason you think might be interested in providing you some gifts. And at that point, it's really important to talk with your development officers about that. Float that list past them, and the reason you want to do that is for your benefit as well as theirs. What you don't want is to put yourself in a spot where you go back to a fundraiser or go back to a developer, a donor, and ask them for money only to find out that the day before somebody else from your institution has been there asking for money, and it makes you look like nobody knows what the other is doing, or worse, that you go and ask them for some money only to find out that there was a really significant ask that was in the works and you potentially kind of messed it up. So it's always good to float that list past your development department before you go out and start working it. And just know that we're not here to say no. It's very, very rare that there's going to be someone on that list that we're going to say, like, no, you can't go talk to them, just flat out no. Usually if that situation is even beginning to bubble up, there's something that we can do to work with it. But we aren't here to say no. We want everyone to succeed, and we know that you need money.
Absolutely. And there are so many donors out there with a real appreciation for community engagement and community service. So I think the pool is definitely big enough. What we can do is to help strategize or to make sure that anything you might want to do is aligned with what's already out there. We had an approach that our center wanted to take with a corporate foundation, and there was a cycle of once a year where you would submit all of the ideas from the university to the foundation. And so our community and foundation relations colleague of mine was able to wrap that into a bigger proposal to make sure it got in front of the right people and was seen. And we can also be very candid with you about who your best potential donors might be. There always might be one person where it's everybody wants to ask them for the big gift, and we'll be really honest if there's a chance or not. So, if you bring a list that has Bill Gates on it, probably, and I've had many lists that have had Bill Gates and Melinda coming to me. So, I help take those off and focus on where time would be best spent, because it's a partnership and your success is our success. So we try and make sure that we use all of our resources to help you make the right ask at the right time.
The other thing that you should be mindful of is don't limit yourself on where you might find dollars. You never know where they might come from. And to that end, most communities have some place, whether it's a community foundation or United Way or some other organization within the community, where there is a list of priorities that have been identified from a community standpoint. Get your hands on that, because if what you are doing ties directly into that, you now have a lot more leverage from the standpoint of going out into the community and looking for money. And it also might help you connect back with priorities within your institution. So keep a very open mind and keep your ears open on what the identified priorities are within your own community.
I'd say the most successful programs that I've worked with have people on the staff, in the area who are passionate about what they do and who reach out thoughtfully to people who are definitely interested or who might be interested. So, they spend time very thoughtfully, but then they also, partner and check back with the development office so that we can make sure that they're represented, this work is being represented, so people know about that connection between the center and the donor. And so, kind of knitting all of that together. But, we are great advocates for you, but you're your best advocate. So don't forget that, you guys make it all happen, much more so than I can.
Very often we're the messenger, but you guys bring the true passion.
Yeah. All right, we'll check the next slide. Now I think we're more on target with our timeline. Action plans. I love action plans.
Go ahead.
So I've learned through the years to really start small, and my plans are usually very grandiose, and then you only tackle part of it and it's disheartening. So I now personally, and what I recommend is starting with a small plan, and that plan can be 3 people that are already involved with your work, or 2 people that are involved and 1 person you hope is. And then just picking up the phone and inviting somebody to coffee. It's one of the lowest impact ways. It's not threatening, and it's a way to really start having that conversation with the people who know you best, and also get their ideas about their impressions of your work and what they think might be impactful for putting together a case for support, or if you have a case for support, asking them for their feedback on how it's presented, because sometimes that's where some of the best feedback comes from, is these coffee meetings, I would say.
Yes, coffee, lunch, breakfast. Pick up the phone and set up a meeting with the development officer. And if you need to go, up and down the hall before you find someone that will meet with you, just don't give up, because all it takes is one good relationship with the development officer to get the ball rolling for you.
No, that's a good point. I was thinking about it from the donor perspective, but I think, what Lynn points out, that's probably the best place to start if you don't have that relationship already. If you don't have a designated person who represents you, there are usually groups that sort of take on a wide variety of, we call them cross-campus initiatives, those programs that touch every area of campus. So there's probably somebody, just ask to say, hey, I want to meet with somebody and run my list by them and talk some strategy. And we love to talk strategy. So don't give up. You'll find one of us to help.
You will. And as you find that person, the next bullet point being to develop your prospect base, your list of potential donors. As we say, it's individuals, it's corporations, it's foundations, but start just keeping a list of that. And then when you have that conversation with your development officer, you're in a better place to talk about what that list might look like, what the realistic possibility is of going out and submitting a request to them, whether it's in the form of a grant application, a gift application, or meeting them for coffee and saying, we'd like to invite you to support our efforts with this. But don't wait to start keeping that list, because the time will come before you know it that you're going to be really glad that you have it.
Yes. And just even 2 proactive outreaches a month can be a really great place to start. If you don't have a rhythm, finding that rhythm and who would be the main person in your shops to, make that contact, just developing a rhythm and going with it can really get you a lot of traction with your potential donors.
I like the next one. Know what you want and how you'll use it. Well, I will just presume that you all want money, right? Because that's why you're on this webinar today. So it's great to want the money, but be able to articulate what you're going to do with that. And that goes back to the what does your budget look like? What are you thinking the impact's going to be? What specifically do you need that money for? And a good question to be able to answer is, how will having that money make a difference with what you're able to accomplish? Is it capacity building? Is it just, bare bones, we need this to keep it going? Is it something that's going to help you grow the program? But be ready to really answer those questions to a certain degree of detail. And by being able to do that, that leads into the next bullet point, which is the proposal, which again can sound really overwhelming. The best proposals are often the shortest ones, couple pages, get down to the point. When you're talking with donors, when you're talking with even your development officers, be careful about jargon. So we opened this webinar today with our jargon because we know we have it. Be careful with your jargon. I can't tell you how many times I've gotten a draft proposal or a draft email, and I'm going through it, and it's all really good. And then I hit one of those 3 capital letters things, and I'm like,
what is this?
What is that? And I have to stop and look at it. And then it's very basic. I mean, when I think about it, I know what it means. But the fact that I had to stop and think about it means it shouldn't have been in there. It should have been spelled out. So be careful with your jargon. And that might be jargon that you pick up even from your community partner, where they're just used to that, so you start picking it up. So be mindful of that.
And that includes the term service learning, right?
Yes.
Yes.
I had to ask what that meant, because I was like, when I first started, I'd never heard the term before.
And same with me. So, it's something we throw around a lot. And then you're sitting with, development officers who are supposed to be tuned into these things. And then worse, you're sitting with a donor, and they don't want to look dumb. They don't want to say, I don't know what that means. So it becomes very, just always think about, I hate to say dumbing it down, but think about writing it for somebody that knows nothing about what you're talking about.
Yes. I think that's a great point. And, with being open-minded, there's so many facets to working with donors that as you go along, they may come up with an idea that you had not thought of, or a community partner that you work with, or a strategy session with the development officer. This is one of the most exciting things about our work is there's this exchange of ideas and strategy, and just by talking with other people, you may think of, or something may come up that you hadn't thought of. So there are a lot of opportunities when you're working with donors and crafting your story and getting this up and running that may come up from these conversations that you start having.
And then the keeping and tracking the impact, I can't stress that enough. I can't, because when we talk about being able to go back to a donor and letting them know what their gift really did, that's what it's all about right there. And that will keep them coming back as long as they have the money, if we can demonstrate that.
Yeah, and don't forget to keep and track your conversations with donors, because some people may wrap it up with your first coffee. Other people, you may need to follow up with a contact that they recommended. So you may work with your development staff and the CRM system and track it that way, or you may have your spreadsheet and you just do it organically that way. But regardless, make sure that there's tracking for your development work so that balls don't get dropped, especially if you have something that's going in the direction you want it to.
Yeah.
Add to the extent you can get photos, take photos.
Yep, it's a good
Photos can help a donor be there without having been there. To the extent you can get a donor on campus or to where you're doing your community engagement, that's even better.
One thing that I know that I kind of tripped on was that I was talking with a donor that like the development people didn't know that I was talking to, and then they found out about it, and then they came back to me and they're like, "Hey, what's going on?" And like I just simply didn't know the chain of command, because sometimes you just kind of get the sense that it's dog eat dog, every person for themselves, like I got to find my money or else, and then, you just go for it. So, and I got my hand slapped, but it was kind of like hey, I know that you don't know the process. I know that you don't know this exists. I'm just trying to make sure that you're in line with what we're doing, because this is going to ultimately make us look bad, all of us, at the end of the day. So I don't know. I mean, that's just something that is forefront of my mind.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And it keeps coming back to the relationships that we as a development team want and should have with really everyone on campus that is interested in doing fundraising. And that, it's faculty, staff, it's academic departments, it goes across the whole campus. And we are not mean people. Really, sometimes people think we're mean, but we're not. We really aren't. We're actually very soft inside. We love to have conversations with people. So, to your experience, before running off and thinking that you're going to ask for forgiveness later, that can be painful. So, talk to development. Just talk to development, because we can save you angst and make you more successful in the long run. But we are not mean. Are you mean, Jennifer?
No, I'm not. I don't think I am.
We have about 8 minutes left for any questions and answers. There's the contact information, and I think on the email that everybody got with the link, Jennifer and Lynette are actually copied on that email. So if there are any specific questions that you all have, or even, I'm kind of thinking in my mind, strategy-wise, if you're having a hard time getting in touch with your development people, you might be able to say, "Hey, Lynette, I know you're in the private college system. Do you have any contacts at, I don't know, Lawrence University or something like that?" I know Christy's on the call. So, but yeah, I mean, those kinds of things that they might be able to be helpful for. But let me just stop and see if anybody has any questions.
Well, so one of the things that I think we talked about when we talked about this webinar, have you ever had any experience of doing proposals or written grants for a university working with a community partner? So as a partnership, the community partner is part of the proposal?
Yes.
Because those can get just kind of sticky and messy, and I'm wondering if you have any thoughts about that.
So they can get sticky and messy, but I will say that funders love that. They really like it when you're working collaboratively within the community, because at that point you can start saying that the one gift you're going to make is going to be used really effectively and efficiently, that we've identified where the holes are within the community. We're going to work together to plug them. We can then be in a spot within the grant to say, we're working with XYZ partner in the community, and they know how we can help, and we're going to go there and we're going to be their arms and legs for them. So while they can be a little bit more sticky, they are also much more compelling from a proposal standpoint. The other benefit that comes from that, when I talked earlier about gathering your data and really being able to measure your impact, if you have that type of a relationship with a community partner, they're going to be much more on board with helping to pull the data, track the data, and give you what you need to do that stewardship report back. And that becomes invaluable because there's only so much that we as the academic institution are going to be able to get in terms of really outcomes.
Mm-hmm. No, that's been our experience too, the way Lynette described it.
And it's also where if there's a report of some sort in your community that has identified the top priorities, that will lend even greater support for a collaborative proposal, because then you're able to say the community has identified that this is a need, and now we are partnering with this organization to help fill that.
I have a question about sort of when writing something that's going to go out to a foundation or when you're writing for a grant, for example. I would love some additional clarification on the role of an individual office and the role of the folks in the development office and sort of who does what, so as the representative of the office, am I doing all of the writing and the folks from development are sort of reviewing that and giving me the thumbs up, or what is an appropriate expectation?
Well, the question is, it depends. I can think of 3 scenarios right off the bat. In one case where it was, the rolled up proposal with other campus programs to a corporation. Our office did a lot of the work, asked for a paragraph and a short budget, and then they formatted it and sent it in. Other times I've been having a discussion myself with an individual donor, and so I'll say, hey, can you write a paragraph for me, and I'll do an email as a follow-up. And then sometimes there's more formalized proposals that I know the center has put out because they have this relationship with a person who works at a local bank, and so then they've driven it. So I think the answer to that is it depends, and you could ask your colleagues and your resources just to determine the best flow of how that would be structured, but it's just combining the best resources for that particular situation.
That I would echo all of that, Jennifer. That's what we've run into here as well. It depends for all the reasons you said.
And we'd be glad to, if you have one where you're trying to figure out where it should live, we'd be happy to talk with you offline about it too.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
There are other questions from anyone else? Come on, there's an entire audience of people at University of Illinois. I know that someone's got to be thinking of a question. There's got to be at least one person in there that's like me, who is always asking questions.
See if you can stump us.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I'm ready.
Sorry, I put you guys on the spot. If you don't have a question, it's fine. But I'm just wondering.
I would be very happy to talk with anyone following the webinar. Give me a call, shoot me an email. If something comes up, just give me a shout.
I also just noticed that I did not put your emails on this thing. So when we all of this information, so we've recorded this webinar. We're going to put up the slides and the recording on our website, so we'll make sure that everybody gets that, and I'll make sure the emails are included in that as well.
Oh, I see a question.
But like I said, everybody should have been copied on the email that got this link. So you could just even do a reply to either Lynette or Jennifer. I just think I'm so grateful that you all were willing to kind of come and share your perspective on this. This has been something that's been it constantly comes up, and the answers, and I think the question that you just got from someone kind of reflect the whole, it's so institutionally driven, it's so individual relationship driven, that it's hard to kind of put some of this stuff and say, this is the standard process that you need to follow. And I just know that so many people have had a hard time breaking into the fundraising and development offices because they don't feel like they're part of the priority list. They don't know anyone. they're just a coordinator of service learning, and they've been, you know, and when I say just, there's not even an office, you know, it's not like you have a group of people. It's like one person who's like an entry-level professional, and they just feel like, who am I? Who am I to go talk to development? Then they have somebody that they report up to, and it's like, you know, like all that kind of stuff. So those are
the best people to talk to.
Well, I was glad to hear when you said that part of what you really look forward to about this job is learning about a new center, learning about a new initiative, learning about a new program. And I mean, that's just, hopefully people hear that on this webinar and think, wow, you know, like I just do need to take my development person just for coffee one morning and say, this is what we do.
Love coffee.
Oh, like if there's one nugget that I hope everybody can take from this, or whatever we've been doing, just email or call one of your development folks and take them out for coffee. That is the single best way you're going to get the ball rolling.
Yeah, and they'll tell you who you need to talk to or make suggestions. And it's just what we love to do is connect other people for the greater good. And just having somebody reach out proactively is actually helpful to us, because sometimes we can't get to everybody, and just knowing that there's an interested party out there who wants to partner with us is half the battle.
And plus, we like to drink coffee.
Yes.
That's great. Well, thanks again. I think I speak on behalf of everyone. Thanks a lot for being willing to come and share with us. Anything else, Natalie, you wanted to mention?
No, this was great. Thank you so much. I think really we were hoping to give folks a sort of starting overview, and this was a really great conversation. So thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thanks, y'all. Take care.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay, so